Thank you very much for joining us, Glenn. We are the last session of today, but we do have to follow Jason Calacanis. So we will try our best to do that. There's a couple of things that he said there at the end that I think it's worth us before we dive into more important matters around Booking Holdings and Booking.com. But he said the perfect playbook is insane growth and then an IPO. I mean, where do you sit on that kind of perspective on the playbook?
Well, first of all, Kevin, good seeing you again. Haven't seen you in a while. Nice talking, and thanks to Phocuswright for inviting me to this. Tough to follow that duo there between Brad and Jason. That's high energy stuff there. Interesting point Jason was making, and there's certainly a significant amount of truth to his point of growth being the mantra for private companies, particularly companies that are looking to continue to raise money, because by showing growth, you can get more capital. Now, here's where it gets tricky in our travel business. There's a lot of people believe that the thing to do is give the product away. So if you get private capital comes in, and it's like a conveyor belt almost. The money comes in from the pension funds that went to the VCs who gave it to the founders who now give it out to the consumer. Consumer likes this because it's a lot cheaper. It's great. And they come back and it shows growth. So you go back to the well, get more money, and eventually you get to be huge, albeit not very profitable. So the question, though, is at what point do you try and say, okay, that only works so long, and then you got to pivot and start making money? And that can be a really hard turn. It'd be interesting to see how some companies are able to, let's say, navigate that difficult change.
Okay, and for fear of this making this the Jason Calacanis part 2, I am curious because he's kind of a self-described bull in a china shop. So if Jason Calacanis is a bull in a china shop at scale number 10, where do you sit in that kind of way that you operate as an executive?
Yeah. So there's a lot of difference between being a very entrepreneurial type man who's done a lot of different stuff. Started as a reporter. He's done a lot of different stuff, been a founder of a company, sold it, made a lot of very interesting and very, very profitable angel investments. So he's able to operate as a lone wolf or on his own. I, on the other hand, though, I have the responsibility of what was, and unfortunately is no longer. I started out the year with 27,000 employees and then had to deal with all the troubles of having to do what we could to preserve as many jobs as possible. At the same time, trying to do what we could for our hotel suppliers. At the same time, having to deal with millions of customers whose lives had suddenly been disrupted and need to deal with them in customer service. You have to have a different viewpoint. You have to be a little bit, you're doing things and how to do things step by step, procedures, processes. Some may say a more conservative point of view, but it's a very different world that I live in than Jason lives in.
I mean, you've referenced some of these already, I would imagine, but can you describe? I don't really want to dwell too much on 2020 so far. I mean, it's been pretty bad for everybody, but can you describe over the last 10 months what have been some of the strategic changes? So you obviously said you talked about having to deal with costs and staff and things like that. Were there any other kind of big strategic changes that you've made?
Now think about this year and how really disruptive it has been to everybody in so many different ways. Mm-hmm. When this terrible virus first came out, and the first thing we're thinking about in January is whether or not we can have our employees. We had about 1,000 people in China who we were planning to take a large percentage of them every year. We have them come to Amsterdam, headquartered there, for our annual employee meeting. And then the question was, this is early January. Gee, this virus coming up, maybe it wouldn't be a good thing to have them come and all that thing like that. And from then on, just things getting worse and worse. So sending everybody work from home. The idea that we're going to try and have everybody work from home, the concept of it was like, are you kidding me? And yet people were able to execute that and make that happen. At the same time, having to deal with all the things that I just mentioned about dealing with our suppliers, with customers, trying to maintain confidence that there is a future for travel. Don't forget, March, April, things were terrible in Europe and the US. And people are wondering, is this going to get better or not? And trying to maintain a sense of hope for everybody, which there was, because I continue to say, pandemics do end. They all end, and they ended long before there was modern medicine. They do end, but trying to maintain that hope, because when it's as dark as it was, keeping people still having some confidence that we have a future, that wasn't easy. But now we're getting to that point where people are beginning to see that there's light at the end of the tunnel. There's hope. And now we just have to keep on working through, because while there are these vaccines, the fact is the infection rates right now are still going the wrong way. More people are dying now than they were a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. That's really bad. People are getting ill. So we got to continue to maintain all the things that have been told to us for people who are in the areas where things are not safe. Certainly some areas of the world, things are very safe, and congratulations to the governments and the people there who did the right things, continue to do the right things, and just hats off to them for doing everything well.
Is there anything, Glenn, that you'd be willing to concede that perhaps you didn't handle as well as you could?
Oh my God, there are lots of mistakes I've made, and not just in this pandemic, a long way back.
I mean in particular this year.
I don't think it's helpful for me to go on repeating. I can tell you, I really screwed up this one. I made a mistake in that one. I'd like, actually, if we could go through the things I thought I did well. We could go that way. I'd prefer to do that. But I will say one thing, that perhaps I could have done a little bit better. And this is something very early, and that was in talking with people and thinking about, I mentioned one point, I said how I thought that we were going to have to, probably going to have to cut back in the number of people. Yeah. And perhaps I should have been a little bit more certain about that and not left the ambiguity. Because in my heart of hearts, when I said that originally, I felt that it wasn't going to be SARS. I was hoping it'd be like SARS, where SARS went away pretty quickly. And I was hoping that would happen, or maybe a little bit later. And if it had, then we wouldn't have had to lay off so many people. But the truth was, actually, we did have to do it because it wasn't SARS at all. And that, unfortunately, I think I could have given, instead of, keeping that hope out, maybe I should have.
Okay. How do you go about modeling for a recovery, if we can call it a recovery? Do you give us your best case, your worst case, and the most likely case that you're kind of thinking through at the moment as we get into this last month and a half of this year, and more importantly, looking ahead into next year, Glenn?
Well, the same way we always do this is we take all the factors that we have that are available to us, all the information that we can gather from all the different sources. And, basically you're putting it into a pot and stirring it around and trying to come up with what you think the different probabilities of eventual outcomes would be. And now you got a probability distribution. You say, okay, and then you put it in the middle of it and say, okay, this is our best guess of what the future is going to be. But that there's a wide distribution of potential outcomes. So I continue to say that my belief is that it will take years, not quarters, for travel to come back to where it was in 2019. Now, I started saying that, by the way, in the winter. So we are getting along. First year is almost done, guys. When I said it'd be years, not quarters, almost done with 1 year almost. But we know that it could come in sooner or it could come in later. And there's so much still that's not known.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to come to an audience question in a minute. If we can just hold that one there for a second. But I'm curious, when you and I spoke this time last year, Glenn, and I think it was perhaps even the year before, it was the start of this concept of the connected trip, which we forever put in inverted commas. I mean, I just wondered what is the kind of the status, if we can give it the status of the connected trip, and your thinking around that? What is working in that regard, and perhaps what isn't working in that regard, first of all?
So we've made a lot of progress. I'm very pleased with how things are going, particularly because given the pandemic, that certainly was a disruptive factor that could have derailed some stuff, but we've continued to work on things. We recently just got up flights for Booking.com in the States. Very happy to have seen that. During this year, we connected to amusement. So we've got activities from amusement coming through. We continue to build out all the things we do with ground transportation. So I am pleased with a lot of things. One of the most important things, of course, payments. That's a critical thing. And we've made some good progress there too, because that's the glue that brings it all together. One of the things that people continue to ask is, can you show me how this has improved loyalty? Can you show me how this is actually a better process statistically? It's actually better. And I don't have that to show yet. And particularly 2020 with fewer people who are coming, it's unfortunate, but I would like to have more demand to be able to show this stuff. But we see examples, we've done testing, and we've seen things that have gone pretty well. So I'm still very bullish on what we're building out. But again, this isn't like it's done tomorrow. This thing is a thing that's going to take some time to get perfected.
Okay, and on the loyalty subject, Glenn, I mean, there's been a couple of sessions already today where the subject of subscriptions has come up. Steve Calver, TripAdvisor, talked about it in their earnings last week and earlier on today. What are your kind of thoughts on subscriptions as a concept? Where, I mean, you have the Booking.com Genius membership and things like that, but where people essentially become club members of Booking.com or across the whole suite of the different brands. I mean, is that something that either interests you, or is that just for the other people and Netflix to worry about?
No, actually, I do think about it because it is something that does seem to be very effective for some types of services, some types of products. Like eDream's been doing this for a while. They have the subscription thing going. And, it's definitely worth exploring and saying, why not? Our belief has always been, we're willing to test anything almost and make sure that, we are not being just stupid in terms of our thing. Oh, that won't work. Let's test it out. A/B test it. Let's see how things can go or not. Look, I am a person, I pay that money to Amazon Prime. I do spend that money and I love it. And I think I'm getting incredible value from it. I don't know if I am or not, but I think I am. That's all that really matters. So why not? But of course, you have to do it in the right way. It has to truly add value. So we'll see.
Okay, natural break here. So we'll take our audience question if that one can come in now. Is our...
Yeah.
Okay. Lorraine.
How you doing? I have an audience question for you. Do you believe Expedia's focus on rationalizing marketing spend will give Booking opportunities to move market share in the U.S.?
I can't really speak for what Expedia's strategy is. They have to speak for themselves and stuff, and I'm not really going to comment on that. What I will say, though, is that we will continue doing what we've always done, is trying to be rational in our approach to marketing, trying to make sure that the money we spend brings back the right ROI, that we are getting the high quality traffic that we want, that it will convert, and that converts and then eventually comes back to us direct, which is really what we all want. In any form of our marketing, we want to make sure we're getting the right messages out, making sure we're getting the right ability to get customers where we want them from, at what price, and make sure that it will be a long-term value to the franchise. We've always been that way, and what another company does or doesn't do isn't going to influence us.
Thanks for the bringing in the question there, Lorraine. So, Glenn, I mean, it's probably fairly safe to say that your strategic move a few years ago to really huge focus on private accommodation is clearly paying off in some respects. Forgive me if I've got the figures wrong, but in your Q3 earnings, I think 33% of your bookings there or thereabouts were for alternative accommodation. Is that a permanent kind of step change in that particular segment of the market is going to remain so important for you, or do you think hotels will recover?
So here's an interesting thing about how this has changed. And let's look at the numbers a little more. And you're right on your number, but let's look at this. Second quarter, we announced that 40% of our new bookings were alternative accommodations. And we mentioned it was significantly above that same number the year earlier. Then Q3, as you're right, about a third of our new bookings, that'd be about 33%, were also new bookings were alternative accommodations. And that also was a couple of points higher than it was a year earlier. So we definitely have seen people who previously may not have looked at the alternative accommodations are looking and buying there. But that's been a trend for a long time. So I think what happened is the pandemic and the desire to be safer and get out of cities into a more rural area, perhaps, brought forward demand for alternative accommodations. That shift would have happened anyway, but it's come forward. Now what's happened is people have tried this. Hopefully most of them liked it. And now next year, when they think about where they're going to stay, they will put in their consideration set alternative accommodations along with hotels. So I think what it's done is it's accelerated a trend they've been having for a long time. Now that benefits us greatly. Why? Because we have the largest collection together of hotels and alternative accommodations. And so many people, when they come trying to figure out where do I want to stay, they don't know yet. Is it a home or is it a hotel or what? So next year or the year after, whenever things are safe again and people are thinking about this, we're the people who have both, provide the very easy comparison right there. That's a point in our favor. The next reason it's helpful is the more supply there is and the more fragmentation there is, the better it is for a distributor. And we're a distributor. So here you have a case where, let's say you're a hotel manager and you've been fighting it out with other hotels and it's been competitive and all that. Now, all of a sudden, the customer is not only looking at all the hotels they could look at, you had to compete to try and get the business. Now you also have to compete against the alternative accommodations too, because the customer is looking at all of it, more of it. So now it's become more competitive. So the hotelier now has to say, I got to get the demand. Where am I going to get it from? Well, Booking.com, which has the incredible amount of demand, that creates the conversations that are a little bit easier between distributor and supplier.
Now, a very common question that, or a discussion that you and I have had for probably far too many years has been the role of your digital marketing campaigns and the influence of Google, and how that impacts and various things. It's an age-old conversation. Last year, yourselves and Expedia Group spent $11 billion on digital marketing. A large proportion of that would have gone to our friends at Google. This year, I would imagine, just for the reasons that why we're doing this online and not in person, that figure is going to be a lot lower. But do you sense that is going to come back to your 2019 levels, or do you think there is perhaps some kind of step change, to use that phrase again, around digital marketing and how you, as one of the biggest suppliers of Google's revenue from the travel industry, is going to change? Do you think?
That's interesting. I think in the end, when things get back to normal, people are still going to like to go to Google. Many people are going to go to Google. That's where they like to start, and lots of people are going to do that. Our role, of course, is try and get as many people as possible to come to us direct. And we've talked about more than 50% of our customers come direct to us, which is, I think, a great thing. And we want to continue to increase that over and over as long as we can. I'm not sure what the numbers will be. I'm not sure when, maybe Google's revenues from travel will be back to where it was. And from my point of view, it's not that relevant. For me, the thing is to continue to drive direct business as much as possible. Now, the real important thing, of course, is when somebody goes to Google, for us to try and capture that person, come to us, and then the second booking, come back direct. That's really the key.
Would you say that is perhaps, one of my next questions was around what are the kind of the final hurdles that you consider for the intermediary segment, if we can call it that? Is it that being able to just get more direct bookings and not have to rely on something like an entity like Google?
Well, it's certainly something that's very helpful in terms of your profitability, because if you don't have to spend as much money on the customer acquisition, that's a great thing. And the way you do that is by providing a better service. And I'll use Amazon as an example. I don't know the last time I was thinking of buying something that I went to Google first, then looked at a bunch of different choices, and then I ended up at Amazon. Almost all the time, I went straight to Amazon to get what I wanted. That's a great, great brand. That's a great service. And we need at Booking.com, we need to be putting out a service that is so good, that the value is so high, that people feel coming back to us again and again gets them what they want in the best way, so that people don't think about going to Google, so people don't think about going to a competitor. That's not easy, because you have to really produce something that is truly better and differentiated.
Yeah, and presumably you wouldn't want people going to Amazon to buy travel at some point.
Boy, that would suck, wouldn't it? Unless unless we have the better service, right? I mean, it's not so easy.
Indeed.
Let me say, they got a lot of money, no doubt. They got a lot of really smart people, no doubt. They've come into travel a couple of times in the past. We all know that, and maybe they'll do it again and again and again. But I will say, it's not an easy place to play.
Okay. And just finally, if we can, Glenn, I mean, what are your own kind of personal reflections on this year? I mean, I'm sure most people know here that you did, you tested positive for coronavirus, I believe, in April. You clearly got through that. I mean, but as you kind of sit back next week, it's Thanksgiving, and you look back on what's happened this year. I mean, what are your own kind of personal reflections on what you've had to go through? Just finish us off with this one.
Well, here's the thing. I was so fortunate. I was so lucky, and my family was so lucky because while we did catch the virus and we were ill, it was so relatively mild. And I have had the unfortunate, it's been unfortunate that I know people who have died from this. And I know people who have gotten very ill and have some people who are still ill with it. The long hauler is the term. And so people talk about that, oh, it's just like the flu or just like a, cold. Well, yeah, for some people it is just like that. And for me and my family, it was. And for other people, it's not. And the thing is, if we all had just followed what the experts, the science, the people who were telling us what to do and had followed those rules, our lives would be so different. And we know this because of the fact that you have countries in the world where people have followed those rules, countries where there were infections and now there aren't. And instead, we had bad management, bad leadership that led people to act in ways that were very destructive to our society and hurt so many people. And that's so unfortunate. And our travel industry, as I said, hurt the most probably. But we're coming out of it. Thank God for the scientists. Thank God for so many people who signed up to be human guinea pigs by trying, being in the trials. Thank God for that. And we'll get through this.
Okay, let's hope we do. So Glenn Fogel, CEO of Booking Holdings, thank you very much for joining us at the Phocuswright Conference 2020. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Kevin.